In the heart of a dazzling city, where glass towers stretch skyward and everything seems designed to impress, stood a luxurious café named Aurelia's. Clear glass windows, $12 coffee mellow jazz, humming from ceiling speakers, and patrons dressed like they just stepped off a magazine shoot. Elena worked there, a young woman with gentle eyes and hair always neatly tied at the nape of her neck. She didn't belong to the glitz of this place, no bold makeup, no designer shoes, but she was always the first to arrive, the one who wiped down every table, inspected every glass, and prepared a warm pitcher of lemon water for the particularly demanding regulars. No one at the cafe knew that every morning before tying on her apron, Elena would make a stop across the street, where an old man sat quietly by a planter just outside the building's courtyard. He never asked for money, never bothered anyone. He simply sat there, wrapped in an old coat, clutching a torn bag, his eyes often cast down toward the pavement, as if afraid to disturb even the air around him. And every morning, Elena would reach into her cloth bag and pull out a box of food, something she'd prepared at home. Sometimes hot soup, other times an egg sandwich with a few carefully sliced apple wedges. She would place it beside him and say, in a voice as soft as the breeze, "I don't have much, but there's always a portion for you." The man never replied. He just nodded sometimes, pressing his lips together as if holding back something long buried. Elena never told anyone at the cafe. At Aurelia's, everything had to be spotless, refined, and in line with luxury standards. People adored heart-shaped latte art, yet frowned when an old coat passed by their table. So Elena kept that habit to herself. Not because she needed praise, but if she didn't do it, no one would, and those quiet little meal boxes, repeated morning after morning, would be the softest sound, yet carry an echo loud enough to make even a world that once turned away finally look back. That day, Elena woke up earlier than usual. The weather had suddenly turned cold, and the wind howled outside her window. She made chicken porridge with ginger, something easy to eat, and warming carefully, poured it into a thermal container, wrapped it with tissues, and placed it in a separate cloth bag, just like every other day. On her way to Aurelia's, she stopped at the usual corner. The old man was still there, curled up in his worn coat. His hand trembled slightly as he received the porridge, his eyes still cast downward as if afraid of the glances of passers-by. Elena smiled. "It's cold today, sir. Eat it while it's still hot." But today wasn't like every other day. When Elena stepped into the cafe, not even having removed her scarf, yet she noticed people huddled together, whispering, and then bursting into laughter. A new co-worker scrolled through their phone, held the screen up to her face, and said, "Elena, looks like you're famous now. So devoted, huh?" On the screen was a secretly recorded video of her bending down to hand food to the old man, accompanied by a sarcastic caption, "Aurelia's angel staff member feeds a homeless guy every morning. Who wants a cappuccino with a hint of homelessness?" The clip went viral immediately. Thousands of shares. Comments flooded in with mockery and cruelty. Does she think she's Mother Teresa or something, sitting near the cafe like that? What if customers see disgusting? Cooking food at home and handing it out, was that stuff even sanitized? Worse still, a few regulars chimed in, leaving negative reviews about the cafe. Disappointed that such a luxurious place lets staff get involved in whatever that smell is. That afternoon, Elena was called to the office. The manager, elegant cold, tilted his head slightly and looked at her over his glasses. "I know you think you are doing the right thing, but here at Aurelia's, we're about experience. No one wants to sip a $10 latte served by someone who just handed food to a guy sleeping on the sidewalk. That's just the reality. He slid a resignation form across the desk. No emotion, no hesitation. Elena didn't ask why. She stayed silent, signed it, carefully folded her apron. And when she stood up, she smiled, not because she was weak, but because she understood, more deeply than anyone, that kindness never needed applause. Before leaving the cafe, she glanced back at the stone wall adorned with praises from the press and glamorous influences and simply thought, not a single one of them knows there's someone starving just 10 meters away. That night, she still passed by the old corner. I placed the final meal box down on the ground, but this time it said nothing. She stood a little longer than usual. The rain had begun to fall lightly. The old man looked up at her as if he wanted to ask something, but Elena only shook her head and whispered, I won't be stopping by every morning anymore. But you still deserve to have breakfast like a human being. Then she turned and walked away, past the neon lights, past the indifference that had become the city's habit. She didn't know. The old man watched her for a long, long time. And that day was the first time he cried, not from hunger, but because someone had just disappeared, someone the world had pretended not to see yet, was the only one who had ever looked at him as a human being. No arguments, no objections, no one tried to stop her. On the day Elena was fired, she packed her things in silence, folding her old apron as if wrapping up the small pride she had carried for years. Not a word of anger, not a single why, because for those who live with their hearts, pain doesn't always need to be spoken. Sometimes it just needs to be quietly stepped through. She returned to the staff room at the end of the afternoon shift, when sunlight was already stretching across the stone floor and cappuccino cups had started to cool on the customers' tables. No one noticed. No one asked why she was back. Elena didn't say a word. She opened her locker, took out the coat that had been hanging there for months, and taped a handwritten note inside the door. No signature, no date, just a few lines left, like a silent imprint, meant to linger long after she was gone. If you ever laughed at me, that's okay, but please never laugh at someone who's hungry, because they may have swallowed more than you could ever imagine. No grand words, no need for an audience, just a person who stayed kind until the very last moment, even to those who had refused to look at her as a human being. That evening, she still walked past the familiar corner, still carrying a small meal box today. It was warm, tofu soup with stewed vegetables. The rain had just stopped, the sidewalk still wet, and the old man sat there as usual, his worn coat damp. But this time, when he saw her approaching, he stood up for the first time. No waiting, no avoidance. Elena said nothing. She simply handed him the meal box, gently, as if offering a farewell that had been simmering for days. He received it with both trembling hands, his eyes fixed on her, as if afraid this moment was only a dream. She bowed her head slightly. I won't be stopping by anymore, but you should still eat breakfast every day, not because of the food, but because you still have worth to be cared for as a human being. She turned to leave, but then his voice rose, hoarse, cracked, yet clearer than any sound that had ever echoed down that street. You're the only one who made me feel like I wasn't trash. Elena paused for a second. She didn't turn around. She just stood still, as if bowing to something sacred, something that went beyond titles, beyond morality, even beyond gratitude. Then she walked away so lightly that even the city didn't notice. The most beautiful part of it had just quietly disappeared, as if it never belonged here at all. 3 weeks after Elena left the cafe, the city kept spinning, as if she had never existed. Aurelia's still lit up every morning, still served lattes, painted in milk foam, still prided itself on elegance beyond standards. That morning, the cafe was hosting an important event, welcoming representatives from a five-star hotel chain, considering sponsorship and partnership. VIP guests, media cameras, and dazzling lights filled the already glamorous space. The manager was busy orchestrating everything. Staff uniforms were pressed to perfection. Glassware was replaced. Fresh flowers imported from the Netherlands. Everything had been arranged for a flawless launch until the glass doors opened and a man stepped inside. No one recognized him. A silver-gray suit, worn-out shoes, and white hair neatly combed but unable to hide the marks of time. He didn't order anything, didn't greet anyone. He simply walked to the center of the cafe and stood there as though he were the guest of honor. A few people frowned. Someone whispered, "Who is that? He looks strange. Who let a homeless man in here?" The manager moved toward him, about to escort him out. But before he could speak, the man pulled out a slim folder and spoke in a voice low but sharp, cutting through the air like a blade through pride. "I'm not here for coffee. I'm here to find someone. Someone you cast out like she was a stain in your spotless space." The room froze. Cameras stopped panning. All eyes turned to him. He held the folder high, its papers trembling in his aged hands, a certificate of disability from the battlefield, a hospital letter from the Veterans Administration, and a handwritten note, creased, yellowed, but still bearing a slanted script. "If one day you're mocked for being kind, please don't stop being good." It was Elena's handwriting, the letter she had left behind when she walked away from the cafe. And he was the man who received every meal box each morning, in what people casually called the dark corner outside the cafe. No one laughed anymore, no more sarcastic remarks. The man stepped forward, his eyes locked onto the manager. "That girl Elena never asked who I was. She didn't care whether I had once been a field medic or just a broken man. She simply looked at me like a human being. And every morning she gave me a reason to live one more day. You called her a problem. But to me, she is the reason I'm still standing here today." No one said a word. A female journalist wiped away tears. The corporate representative placed his pen down, no longer interested in any contract. And the same man who had dismissed Elena without a shred of empathy could only bow his head, as if the weight of every word he had just heard was now pressing down on the shoulders of his designer suit. The room remained silent. No one moved, as if every word the old man spoke had frozen the air itself. He calmly opened the folder, pulling out an old photograph, faded but still painfully clear. In it was a man in military uniform, administering first aid to a young soldier amidst the smoke of battle blood on his hands, eyes devoid of fear, carrying only one thing: duty. Then he looked up, his voice low, but carrying across the room, without need for a microphone. "I am Dr. Joseph Hale, a frontline medic who served in the rescue unit in Kandahar, Afghanistan in 2006. I saved 27 lives in the last 4 months before an explosion permanently took away my ability to walk." A gasp escaped from the crowd. Someone recognized the name. A hero. A symbol once celebrated in the media, gone without a trace for nearly a decade. He continued slowly, "After my wife died of cancer, my son left me. I withdrew from the system. I refused benefits, refused treatment, refused titles because I didn't believe I deserved them. I lived in silence, hidden under street dust and society's indifference. No one asked who I was. No one stopped, except for one girl. She never asked my name, never pitied me. She just placed breakfast next to me every day for over a year and said something I've never forgotten. I don't have much, but there's always a portion for you. A staff member at the cafe began to cry. A guest whispered Elena. Was it her Dr. Hale? Nodded his eyes, turning red. I didn't come here to blame anyone. I came to do something she never asked for, to say thank you and to restore the honor of someone once accused of tarnishing the brand image. She didn't just save me, she gave me a reason to live. Every morning. One meal, and a piece of dignity I thought I'd lost forever. No one in the cafe remained seated. The entire room stood. One guest began to clap. The sound of applause started in a corner, then spread, then erupted. It was no longer a cafe, no longer a launch event. It had become something rare in this day and age, a place where kindness once cast out had returned to be honored by the very people who once turned away. As the final round of applause faded, the room remained steeped in quiet confusion. Some still couldn't believe what they had just heard. Some were in tears. Others lowered their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Dr. Hale didn't need more emotion. He wasn't there to be praised. He had come to do something Elena never asked for, but fully deserved. He pulled a thick envelope from his leather case, carefully sealed. On it, only 2 handwritten words, for Elena. He looked toward the manager who had signed off on her dismissal and spoke, his voice calm and steady, like a declaration. I received compensation from the government after over 10 years of delay. They sent me close to $250,000. I don't need that money, but I know someone who deserves it more. All eyes turned to the envelope in his hand. I used that money to purchase the long-term lease of this space. As of today, this cafe will no longer belong to any brand. It will carry a new name. A regional director stood up in panic, ready to object, but Dr. Hale raised his hand to silence him, then pulled out the contract from his case, complete with verified signatures from the building owner and legal confirmation. I once withdrew from this world because I no longer believed anyone was worthy of sacrifice, but Elena made me believe again. And if someone like her can't have a place in an establishment that prides itself on luxury culture, then maybe it's time we redefine what luxury really means. The room froze. He placed the envelope on the bar counter, the same counter where Elena had once stood crafting coffee with clean hands, clear eyes, and a gentle voice no one truly listened to. I don't know if she'll ever want to come back here. Maybe not. But I want to make sure that if she does, she'll never have to bow her head to anyone again. The manager lowered his face in shame. The customer, who had once claimed she was unsanitary, quietly tore up his complaint form. And everyone from the cafe staff to the corporate executives understood. The woman they once cast out for being too kind was now being given an entire space back as an apology made not in words but in action. 3 weeks later, the old sign was quietly taken down. There was no grand opening. No influencers are taking photos. But something quietly happened that made the entire street stop and look. An elderly man with his own hands hung a new sign, dark wood background, white letters deeply carved into the grain, the quiet table. A place where kindness doesn't need to be recorded. Inside, the cafe hadn't changed much. The cups were still beautiful. The tables were still spotless. The music was still soft. But in the far corner, near the window overlooking the street, something entirely new had been added. An old wooden chair, the one that used to sit on the sidewalk outside, now stood with quiet dignity. Next to it was a small glass frame, holding the original handwritten note Elena had left in her locker. If you ever laughed at me, that's okay. But please, never laugh at someone who's hungry. No one replaced Elena. No one dared sit in that chair. It stood as a living reminder of a girl once cast out for cooking a meal for a homeless man. And then something unexpected began to happen. Day by day, people came to the cafe not for the coffee, but because they wanted to sit, not just to drink, but to feel that kindness still had a place. A mother brought her child, pointed to the chair, and said, "You know, this is where a girl once got fired for feeding the poor, and now this place belongs to her." A man left an envelope beneath a flower vase with a note inside. "I used to mock her. Now I carry a loaf of bread every morning for the elderly man at the bus stop near my house." The media showed up, but Dr. Hale, now healthier thanks to returning to treatment, only said one thing: "We don't do interviews. Here, everyone is welcome to sit, but no one needs to explain their kindness." One afternoon, golden sunlight fell across the glass table as a young woman walked in. She wasn't dressed fancy. Hair was tied neatly, a worn cloth bag in hand. No one had to ask. The new barista simply said gently, "Welcome back, Elena." She smiled, said nothing, just walked over to the empty chair by the window, sat down, and ordered a cup of hot tea. Across the street, an old man sat watching, and for the first time in many years, he stood up and smiled back. The quiet table is no longer just a cafe. It is a place to return to. Under Elena's care, nothing needed to change too much in appearance. The cups were still white. The walls are still cream. The music is still gentle. But the very breath of the place had changed. Every little corner now carried the warmth of real people and real moments. A bookshelf where anyone could take a book home without paying. A wooden board with handwritten notes like, "If you still get to see the sunrise today, then you still have one more chance to be kind." And most importantly, everyone, regardless of status, clothing, or bank balance, was served with the same respectful gaze. One day, a disheveled woman stood at the door, clutching her child, trembling. She was about to walk away when she sensed the eyes inside the cafe. But Elena stepped outside first. She didn't ask, she didn't judge. She simply invited her in. "You can sit at any table. Here, seats don't judge the people who sit in them." A cup of hot chocolate was placed before the child, a warm bowl of soup before the mother. And after a few minutes, no one looked at them as strangers anymore. Because Elena had planted something in this place that society had long forgotten: the ability to see each other as humans without conditions. She created the anonymous table, a spot where every weekend free meals were served to anyone who walked in and said, "I need a light day." No explanations, no proof. Whoever came sat, and when they left, they knew that kindness didn't care where you came from, only that you were still hungry, whether in your belly or in your heart. No one called Elena the cafe owner. People simply called her by a quiet name, the one who kept humanity alive for this world. The quiet table now had no customers, only people seeking one another and leaving with the feeling that they had been seen, believed in, and revived by something deeply kind. Elena never posted anything about herself, but she gave more than any viral story ever could. Because sometimes a single chair in the corner of a quiet cafe, if warm enough, can become the place that saves an entire life unraveling at the seams. The quiet table became a destination for the entire city. Journalists wrote about it. Tourists visited it. Elena never sought fame. She never tried to stand out. In a world where everyone fought to be seen, she chose to remain on the sidelines, quietly doing what was right and slipping away before anyone could applaud. But kindness, when big enough, begins to shine on its own. The quiet table wasn't created to go viral. It existed so anyone could have a seat, even if all they carried was exhaustion. Elena didn't hang up advertisements, didn't run media campaigns. She simply cleaned the tables, boiled water, and always saved one extra serving for the guest who hadn't arrived yet, but surely would need it. And then, people started to come. A young mother brought her child asking for a cup of tea because she didn't dare step into other cafes. An old man from the nursing home came every morning just to sit by the sunlit window, the place where for the first time in 10 years someone had asked him, "Did you sleep well?" No gimmicks, no slogans, only kindness repeated so many times it became culture. And so, the media took notice, a small feature report, then a blog post that went viral, then a TV producer wanted to make a documentary. And soon, people began calling Elena by names she never dreamed of, an angel in real life, the woman who turned coffee into the gentlest prayer. Elena couldn't hide her smile, but she kept doing the same old things, at the same old pace, opening the shop before 6 a.m., wiping each wooden chair by hand, slipping handwritten notes into teacups as if whispering something personal to the person who'd sit there. What she didn't know was that as her light spread further, those who thrived in the dark began to feel threatened. Just a few blocks away, the upscale coffee chain Aurelia Roasters was seeing a drop in customers. No one seemed interested anymore in sterile bar counters, nitrogen-brewed coffee served in air-thin glass, or employees smiling to brand standards. And Selena Grant, the founder of Aurelia, a businesswoman once dubbed the queen of experience-driven branding by a major magazine, couldn't bear the truth. Her chain of 47 locations was losing to a woman without a logo. Elena, a girl once fired, once dismissed as too emotional for business, now praised by an entire city for something Selena couldn't buy with money, trust, and affection. And in a closed-door strategy meeting, in front of her marketing, PR, and legal teams, Selena said just one sentence: "If what she built is trust, then make people start to doubt it." And with that, the game began. Not with coffee, but with schemes. The campaign didn't begin with an article. It began with a leaked message. An email was sent to nearly 20 media outlets and community groups with the subject line: "The woman hailed for charity, secretly linked to a convicted criminal." Attached was a blurry video of Elena handing an envelope to a bearded man in a tattered coat, captured from across the street by a zoom lens. That very night, it spread uncontrollably. A few tabloid sites ran screaming headlines: "The Quiet Table, Charity Facade, or Money Laundering Front, from Virtue to Vice, the Shady Rise of a Self-Proclaimed Saint." An anonymous account appeared dedicated solely to exposing the dark side of Elena. They released a stream of carefully fabricated evidence, photoshopped invoices suggesting she received cash from undisclosed sources. A confidential witness, actually a planted employee from Aurelia Roasters, claimed they were forced to stay silent after discovering envelopes of cash hidden in the storage room. A fake complaint was sent to both the health department and tax office, alleging that the Quiet Table was engaged in suspicious activities, interacting with infected individuals, and failing to meet public hygiene standards. And even a fake Elena account was created posting, "I used to be a good person, but this world taught me kindness doesn't buy bread." Though Elena quickly denied it, social media didn't care about the truth. They only needed doubt. Influencers began turning their backs. A few who once praised her quietly disappeared. Sponsorship partners requested to suspend all engagements until further investigation. Regular customers who once called her by name now avoided eye contact when entering the cafe. A mother who had once brought her child wrote on Facebook, "I'm not sure anymore if I trusted the right person." Kindness is so easily exploited these days. Elena sat inside the cafe, still open every morning, but for the first time, there were more chairs than people. She read every message, every comment, every anonymous accusation, sent to the cafe's inbox. Her hands still made tea, but her heart was dissolving in the water. And the cruelest part, at a brief press conference held by Aria Roasters, Selena Grant, with a graceful face and a soft voice said, on live television, "I'm not here to judge, but I believe. Truly good people don't need to prove themselves with tears." Elena gave no response, because good people, real ones, don't know what to prove when the world has already decided not to believe. That afternoon, the quiet table was so empty, you could hear the sighs of wooden chairs left untouched. The walls that once held dozens of loving notes now displayed only a few torn scraps. The flower pots, once gifted by customers, had withered not from lack of water, but because no one stopped to care for them anymore. The cafe that used to feel as warm as a cupped hand now felt colder than the first rain of the season. Elena sat at the counter, stirring a cup of tea, long gone cold. She didn't cry. Crying was a luxury for someone who had read dozens of comments calling her fake a fraud and saying no one's kind without an agenda. She wasn't angry either. Anger takes energy, and she had run out of it the night the third anonymous complaint was taped to her door at midnight. Every morning, she still opened the cafe, still wiped down the tables, still left a free meal on the shelf, even though no one took it anymore. But the people who once called her by name had vanished. The eyes that once looked at her with affection now avoided hers. Her kindness hadn't been rejected, it had been turned into something that made others feel ashamed for once believing in it. And just when she believed no one would ever walk through that door again, with faith in her, it opened. She didn't look up. Lately, every time the door opened, it was another cut. A reporter, a stranger, is secretly filming. A neighbor returning a past thank you with a distant glance. But this time, the footsteps were slow, steady, and carried no suspicion. A chair was pulled out across from her. No one ordered anything. No one demanded answers. Only a voice, low, clear, and so gentle it made the air still. "Does this place still serve those who've been shattered?" Elena looked up, and her heart pulled so tight she could hardly breathe. In front of her was Nathaniel. Not a stranger. He was the man she had helped 3 years ago on a rainy night when he was jobless, hopeless, and starving. She had handed him a leftover meal and looked at him not with pity, but simply as a fellow human being. The next day, he disappeared without a word, leaving behind only a thank you scribbled on the back of a receipt. "You don't know it, but you just saved a soul on the edge." And now he had returned. No fanfare, no dramatics, no questions. He simply sat down, placed his hand on the table, and spoke with the same steady tone as the first time she laid a hand on someone who needed to be heard. "I've seen every article. The accusations, the doctored images, the edited videos. I've watched them build a narrative to destroy you without needing anything more than the kindness you once gave away. And for the first time, I realized I don't need to verify a thing." Elena sat frozen. Her hand trembled, but not from pain. Her heart, one she thought had gone cold, was beating again, softly but surely. Nathaniel continued, his eyes fixed on hers without blinking. "I didn't come to ask if you're okay. I know you're not. I just came to ask one thing. Do you want me to stay?" Elena didn't answer right away. She swallowed hard, as if all the trust that had been buried these past days was now rising to the surface, breaking open. Then she nodded. Just a little. But in that nod was a silent sob and 3 unspoken words. "Please don't leave." There was no applause, no cameras. Just 2 people. One is exhausted from being crushed by the world, and one who returned exactly when no one else dared stand beside her. They say great love comes from grand gestures, but sometimes loving someone is just sitting down without asking, "Why is everyone turning their back on you?" and simply saying, "Can I be the one person who doesn't leave?" Elena had always believed that kindness, if persistent and genuine, would eventually be heard, no matter how many misunderstandings it passed through. But she had never imagined a day would come when her goodness would be dissected like an open wound in the courtroom of public opinion, where no evidence was needed, only a fast enough click. She never thought someone who simply brewed tea and left free pastries could become the target of such a calculated smear campaign. Yet it was happening, each piece falling into place, like a cruel puzzle someone had scripted long ago. After Nathaniel returned, bringing not only his presence, but also the resolve not to let her fight alone, they began to investigate. Quietly, without anger, just with the eyes of two people who had hit rock bottom and knew this truth: if they didn't reclaim their story, someone else would rewrite it in dirt. Nathaniel used every skill he'd learned from his days as a war photojournalist, image forensic, sound analysis, to trace each fake narrative. A video clip accusing Elena of handing a suspicious envelope to a shady man had gone viral. But upon review, the frame rate didn't match, the audio was added in post-production, and most damning of all, a window reflection revealed the man was actually a hired actor previously featured in an Aria Roasters commercial. A tell-all article about Elena published by a high-follower account was traced back through metadata to the daughter of Aria's communications director. Everything had been orchestrated: a witness, staged analysis, surveillance footage, cropped from Aria's own security feed, then inserted into a fabricated context where Elena appeared to be dealing under the table. A masterfully built illusion where truth wasn't distorted, but replaced. What broke Elena the most wasn't any article or photo. It was the audio clip that spread fastest, a recording in which she seemingly admitted to using public sympathy to build her image. But when Nathaniel ran it through forensic voice software, they discovered the awful truth. The voice was hers, assembled from past live streams, spliced word by word, syllable by syllable, using AI. A new weapon, silent, surgical, leaving no fingerprints, and powerful enough to nearly destroy her. Elena sat in the storage room behind the café, gripping a printed document that bore the title of Aria's internal PR campaign: Reverse Spotlight Strategy. Goal: exhaust public sentiment through emotion. She read it over and over, unable to believe that someone had written words so cold. They didn't attack her actions. They didn't twist outcomes. They targeted only one thing: the public's belief in the idea of kindness. She no longer trembled. Her eyes were dry. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word dropped like a stone into the hearts of those who heard it. They don't want to shut down the cafe. They want to destroy what I stand for, that being kind should never be a source of shame. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment, then said, "If you're not giving up, then this time you're not doing it alone." She nodded. She was no longer the girl who once cried in the kitchen over a misunderstanding. Elena was now a woman who had faced the destruction of her reputation, social exile, and the loss of every regular customer, but still wanted to keep one seat open for a stranger tomorrow, free from judgment. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't file lawsuits. She did only one thing. She reopened the cafe and invited the press not to defend herself, but to tell her story with truth that needed no clickbait. The press conference had no red carpet, no welcoming music, no assistants handing out materials or flashy graphics of strategic brand plans. Just a single microphone resting on an old wooden table, the same table Elena once used to serve pastries to a grandmother with memory loss and to a child who had no parents around. The cafe wasn't packed that day, but outside, in front of its modest storefront, there were 6 cameras, 3 reporters, 2 bloggers known for this week's fastest headline, and dozens of bystanders not there to support, but to see what the girl once praised for her kindness had to say in response to the accusations flooding social media. Elena stepped out from the back wearing a simple linen dress. No makeup, no heels, no branding, no media allies. Nathaniel stood behind her, holding a folder of hard evidence. But she didn't touch it. She didn't need it. Not yet. She stood before the mic, took a deep breath, and said, "I didn't come here to refute anything, and I didn't come to apologize. I came to tell a story." The noise outside seemed to pause. Those who had planned to live stream forgot to press record. She continued, 3 years ago, I gave a homeless man a box of cold rice. No one filmed it. No one shared it. But the next morning, he came back, and I started saving him a portion every day. No reason, not for gratitude. I just thought, if I could do it, I should. She spoke in a calm, even tone. No trembling, no strain, no urgency. Her voice felt like she was reading from a memory, one someone had tried to distort, but that still lived whole inside her. She told of the first rumors, the edited videos, the way a single anonymous message could exile her from the trust of thousands who once called her name with admiration. She didn't go through each accusation. She simply recounted each wound. I've heard people say, I staged it all, that I'm fake. I had a plan to profit from being good. I used to be scared. Truly, I cried. But then I realized people don't need proof to love someone, and they don't need proof to turn on them either. Behind her, Nathaniel's grip tightened, but Elena remained steady. Her eyes carried no blame. She simply looked directly into the lens. I'm not standing here to reclaim my name. I'm standing here for those who once believed in me, and then began to doubt themselves for doing so. I want them to know, if you once believed in kindness, you don't have to be ashamed. Someone in the crowd swallowed hard. A young journalist who had written the first false article lowered their head, locking eyes with her, but unable to hold the gaze. Elena ended with a line that wasn't bolded, wasn't italicized, but landed so silently that it made everyone pause for a beat. If someone builds a story to darken your name, you don't have to build another to defeat them. Just tell the truth and let it stand unshaken. She stepped away from the mic. No applause followed, but no one asked another question. Because truth, spoken in the calmest voice, can be the most earth-shaking sound of all. And in that moment, in a city that had once risen in outrage and turned away on a whisper, someone took out their phone, not to live stream, but to type a message. I think we were wrong. The next morning, Elena's brief speech was quietly reshared across social media. There were no dramatic sound effects, no clickbait captions, no viral expressions, just a woman speaking with eyes free of anger in a voice that didn't ask for proof. And somehow, that silence shook the entire online world. Some people began taking down their defamatory posts. A few who had mocked her quietly deleted their stories, but Elena said nothing in return. She didn't post a victory update. She didn't live stream. She didn't declare war. She simply reopened her cafe that Monday as if none of the wounds had ever existed, just to brew a pot of tea, like the very first day. But something strange began to happen. There was no long line of people waiting to apologize. Just one by one, they came back. A single mother who had written a post questioning Elena stood outside the cafe with her young daughter unable to step in for nearly 10 minutes. Eventually, Elena opened the door, gently placed a hand on the woman's shoulder, and said, "If you still believe in a cup of tea, then I still have a seat waiting." A young man who once shared a meme calling her the queen of fake kindness sat silently for hours, ordering nothing only to leave behind a small note by the sugar jar. "I've never been betrayed by kindness, only by my own cowardice." And then a week later, a special invitation arrived for Elena from one of the city's most prestigious universities. They weren't inviting her for media exposure, not for a campaign. They invited her to teach a course on ethics in modern media. At first, Elena declined. She said, "I'm no expert. I don't have anything to teach." But the representative replied simply, "That's exactly why you're perfect. The students believe you not because of your degree, but because you were drowned by public opinion and still chose to be kind." And so she came. No slides, no graphs, just stories. Little stories about how a free cup of tea saved an old man's life, about how a cruel comment can linger longer than a broken bone, and about how a modern society can destroy a kind soul in just 4 days simply because she didn't fight back loud enough. After the talk, a student approached her privately, his eyes emotional. He said, "I used to think being kind was weak, but after watching the whole city turn on you and seeing you open your cafe the next morning, I changed my mind." Elena didn't answer right away. She just smiled gently, like the very thing that makes people believe in humanity again. And so her little cafe became a place for those who had once lost faith in themselves, not to drink coffee, but to learn how to love quietness again. To understand this, you don't have to raise your voice to be right. Sometimes standing still without losing your heart is the highest form of courage. Elena had always known that if she wanted to change the world, she first had to be strong enough to stand within it without bowing her head. But there was one person she could never convince, never confront, and never pretend not to care about: Evelyn, Nathaniel's mother. Evelyn wasn't an enemy. She was a mirror, and in that mirror, Elena had never quite seen herself. At their first meeting, Evelyn smiled with perfect manners, but never looked at Elena for more than 3 seconds. She didn't ask about dreams, childhood, or anything that made Elena who she was. Instead, there were discussions of accomplishments, prestige, lineage, and nods full of silent judgment. Elena smiled a lot that day, not because she was happy, but because she didn't know how else to survive in a room full of well-dressed people speaking gracefully where not a single one truly wanted her to return. Evelyn never opposed the relationship, but sometimes silent disdain hurts more than open rejection. After the media storm, after Elena had been slandered, crushed, and torn to pieces, not once did Evelyn reach out. She didn't ask, "Is she okay?" She didn't call her son. Nathaniel once said, "My mother's the type who doesn't need to speak to express her disappointment." Elena only smiled. But that silent disappointment, though never voiced, had always hung over her like a verdict that needed no signature. So when Nathaniel said his mother wanted to visit the cafe, Elena stood still for a long time. What does she want to say? She didn't say. Nathaniel answered, eyes steady. "But I think she's changed. Not because you tried to prove anything, but because for the first time she realized she may have misjudged a person." That afternoon, the cafe was quiet. Elena brewed a pot of mint tea, the kind Evelyn had asked for during their first meeting, and set it on the small wooden table near the window. When Evelyn walked in, she wasn't overdressed. No jewelry, no heavy makeup, but she walked with grace, shoulders straight, and for the first time, her gaze lingered on Elena as someone real. They sat down. For 3 full minutes, no one spoke. There was no laughter, no tension. Just an atmosphere so heavy it felt like someone was peeling away decades of assumptions with every breath. Finally, Evelyn spoke. I used to think my son needed someone stronger. The kind of woman who speaks up, defends her rights, wears armor. Her voice was soft, but each word struck Elena like a stone in her chest. I thought you were kind because you were weak, silent because you had no other choice, patient because you were afraid of conflict. I was wrong. Elena gently tightened her grip around her teacup. She didn't respond, but she didn't lower her eyes like before. I watched everything you went through. I saw how you were dragged down, ridiculed, and doubted. And I saw how you didn't scream, didn't complain. You just stood there, kept the cafe open, and gave people a place to find themselves again. Evelyn paused. Her eyes no longer looked away. For 50 years, I lived in a world that taught me silence was weakness. To be respected as a woman, you had to be fierce, brilliant, and better. But I've never seen anyone stay quiet and make a whole city stop like you did. Elena blinked. For the first time, her throat tightened, not from anger, but from being understood. Late, but sincerely. And then the unthinkable happened. Evelyn bowed her head. I'm sorry for never asking you a single real question about who you are, for letting my son love someone. His mother never even tried to understand. There were no claps, no cameras, but in that quiet little cafe, Elena was no longer the girl who wasn't good enough. She was the woman who made a strong mother rethink her pride, without debate, without victory, without fame. And sometimes that is enough to begin a real family. Elena never thought she would become a mother, not because she didn't want to, but because doctors had once told her the chances were nearly zero. The medical visits, the flickering hopes, the nights of silent grief in Nathaniel's arms, they had taught her to let go of expectations and live fully in the present. So when she found out she was pregnant, she stared at the ultrasound screen for a long time. And when the doctor gently said, not one, but two, a boy and a girl, she didn't cry. She simply smiled as if God had quietly added a bonus stanza to the end of her broken song. 9 months later, in the soft white light of the hospital room, as she gripped Nathaniel's hand and heard the first cries of their children, a sound that had never existed in her world, Elena knew she hadn't just survived her own war. She had carried new life out of it. They named the children Theo and Clara. Clara, the girl with calm, deep eyes, just like hers. Theo, the boy who held on to everything tightly as if he had learned not to let go even from the womb. From the day the twins arrived, the quiet table was no longer just a cafe. It was a home. It became the place where their children learned to crawl amid customers' laughter, where Nathaniel hung family photos beside a handwritten note. Sometimes the most precious things are born after what felt like total loss. Evelyn, the woman who once sat across from Elena with eyes full of doubt, was now the first to rise each morning to cook porridge for Clara. She didn't use grand words. She simply acted. And once, as she gently placed a wool shawl over Elena's shoulders while she napped on the couch, she whispered, I never imagined I'd learn from my own daughter-in-law. That kindness is something we sometimes need to relearn. The quiet table became a symbol, but not of victory, a symbol of enduring kindness. The kind that doesn't need to be broadcast. The kind that is kept practiced and lived daily like breakfast, like breathing, like loving someone without condition. Every week, Elena still placed a meal by the front door, even though no one came to collect it anymore. When someone asked, why do you keep leaving that food? That man's long gone, isn't he? She simply replied, because maybe someone else will sit there one day And if it's not ready, how will they know they're still seen? One morning, Clara, now old enough to walk, approached the familiar table and placed a handwritten note letters, still crooked and unsure, "Thank you for seeing others as people." Elena froze. It was the very sentence Mr. Victor, the homeless man from long ago, had once scribbled for her on a napkin. It was no longer a message Elena had preserved. It was a legacy Clara now carried, a bloodline, a belief, a quiet, unstoppable hope. Elena looked at her daughter, then at the café. Nathaniel was standing by the sunlit window, holding Theo. She smiled, softly, but with all her soul. And if anyone were to ask Elena, "Do you regret being kind in a world that once turned its back on you?" she would answer with every ounce of love she had, "No, kindness is the one thing that when given away stays within you." And sometimes it becomes the name your child calls you with eyes full of reverence. I never thought the thing that would make a man feel most fulfilled wasn't success status or victory, but the honor of standing behind a woman like her, not to lead her, not to shield her, just to stand behind her so that as she walked forward, I could see clearly I was witnessing something rare, something sacred. Elena isn't the kind of woman who enters a room and makes heads turn. She's quiet, humble, and rarely speaks, but she has something that makes people pause, even when they don't know why. The way she's kind without reason, gives without asking, and lives true to herself, even when the whole world told her to change. I've seen her through her best days, and the days when there was nothing left to hold on to. I've watched her be misunderstood, exiled from what she built, called names she never deserved. I watched my mother, strong, proud woman, stand before her and see something unfamiliar, unsettling, yet undeniably right. And I've seen Elena not fight, do not walk away, not blame, just keep living with the quietest strength I've ever witnessed. Someone once asked me, "How did you know she was the one?" I think it was the moment I saw her at her lowest, with no one by her side, no one defending her, no one believing in her, and she still held light in her eyes. Elena doesn't shine like stage lights. She glows like a candle in the dark, a quiet flame that makes you never want to leave the room. I love her not just because she's my wife or the mother of my children. I love her because through her, I learned what it means to love someone. With reverence, not fleeting admiration, but reverence, like you would for a silent mountain, a never-ending river, a home that stays open even when storms rage outside. And the day my mother sat beside Elena, took her hand, and called her daughter-in-law for the first time, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt justice, a quiet justice earned by a heart that never strayed from what was right, even if it meant walking that road alone for a long, long time. Today, as I watch Elena rock our daughter by the window and hold our son sleeping in my arms, I think this is the greatest thing a man could ever have. Not a perfect family, but a home built from trust, forgiveness, and the love of a woman who never let the world make her hard. I don't need anyone to envy me. I only hope that when people look at Elena, they believe this kindness, gentleness, and a heart that doesn't wear armor are still things worth protecting. And if anything makes me feel like the luckiest man alive, it's not that I married a wife. It's that I get to live beside a living proof of goodness. And every day, I learn to love her, not like a gift, but like a blessing. Elena's story didn't begin with a miracle. It began with a leftover meal, a nameless homeless man, and a girl who never waited for a thank you. But then, everything got swept into a cruel spiral where kindness was dissected, distorted, and turned into a scheme. The most terrifying part wasn't what people said about her. It was how quickly the world was willing to believe the worst, simply because kindness had become so rare it was mistaken for a lie. And in the moment when trust seemed to crumble, Elena didn't shout, didn't fight back, didn't plead her case. She just stood still, kept the cafe open, kept the tea warm, and let time prove one thing. The person who refuses to give up on goodness is the strongest one of all. What's the real lesson here? That kindness has never been easy, especially in an age where suspicion is fed by clicks and truth is drowned by the speed of a share. But if you have the courage to live honestly, even when no one believes you, then one day the world that once turned away will stop just to hear your story. I believe this kindness doesn't need to be loud. It only needs to be repeated, quietly, relentlessly, truthfully. Because the most beautiful thing isn't being kind to be seen, it's when your child sees you being kind and thinks that's simply how life is meant to be. If this story touched you, if you've ever been hurt for being too real or dismissed for giving too much, know this: you are not alone. Please like and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And subscribe to Toch Story so you don't miss the next story that will move your heart, a place where kindness is called by its true name and ordinary people are told as the extraordinary souls they are. Because sometimes the only thing you need is someone to tell your story in the kind voice you always deserved. See you in the next chapter. Toch Story, where kindness still has a place to live.